Well, welcome to another Friday night. We've been looking at this series on the 60 characteristics of complex trauma, looking at each one individually and going to a deeper level of understanding how complex trauma, the coping tools I used to survive the trauma, ended up messing up my adult life. And so today we're going to come to control issues. And for many people from complex trauma, control issues or being a control freak is a big problem. And so I want to help you understand why that is so, the damage that it does, and then what's involved in changing. So let me begin with a definition of what I mean when I talk about being a control freak or having control issues. It's an attempt to force others to do what you want, whether they want to or not. So it's your will superimposed on their will, removing free will from them. In other words, it's an attempt to play God. And so what you believe is you can't trust people to meet your needs or respond properly to your desires. So the only way you're going to get your needs met or get what you want is if you're in control. And so there's a trust component that is underneath all of the control issue stuff. But more than just a trust, underneath control issues is deep fears. And so control issues are motivated by a lot of fear. But most control freaks would never admit that. And so that's what I want us to understand. But let me give you just a couple of definitions that people have used or comments they've made about control freaks. The first is being a control freak is attempting to manage your outer world to soothe your inner world. In other words, you feel your inner world is a mess, but you can't fix it. You can't resolve the problems. And so you're in this turbulent place. And so your solution is, if I can't fix my inner world, let's fix the outer world, and maybe that will make my inner world feel better. Another one is control freaks need to control others, not because there are issues in the others, though that's what they say, but because of something wounded deep inside of them. They will try to say that they do it because the other person's behavior or attitude is wrong, but that's a lie. It's all about what's going on in them. That's the cause of this need to control. And so people who are control freaks usually end up becoming excellent manipulators. And again, they may not admit that, but that is true. So let me show you how becoming a control freak comes out of complex trauma. And what I want to say up front is there's many aspects of complex trauma that lead to a person becoming a control freak. It's fueled and fed by multiple complex trauma issues. So the first one is shame. So what is shame? I don't feel good enough. So anybody that gets to know me is going to reject me, neglect me, abuse me, abandon me. So I can't let people see the real me. I have to hide that. But in order to hide that and never be rejected, I have to stay in control. So control is a huge need for those with lots of shame. We've already talked about if I can't get my needs met by asking, which is what happens with a child in control in complex trauma, the child begins to realize the only way I'm going to get my needs met is if I'm in control. And so that leads to control issues. Then, if I can't trust the people close to me to take care of me, to keep me safe, to meet my needs, then the only way I am going to survive is to not trust people and be in control. Another huge issue that comes out of complex trauma. Further, the family I'm in, I seem to always be getting hurt. And then I go in the outside world and I get hurt again. I don't like that. So the way to reduce getting hurt is to be in control. Or whenever I go into an unknown, whenever there's a change, that increases the possibility of getting hurt. So whenever there's changes or I'm facing the unknown, I need to up my control so that I have less chance of getting hurt. All of that is really saying people from complex trauma live with anxiety. Anxiety about being discovered for who they are, the imposter. Anxiety for their needs not getting met, for being safe, for not getting hurt. And so control is all about trying to control or manage that anxiety, to get rid of that anxiety. There's another element that comes out of complex trauma. Many feel abandoned. So they're neglected, they're abused, they're physically abandoned, but all three of those make them feel that nobody's there for them, that nobody wants to connect with them. Nobody wants to get them and love them unconditionally. And so as they get into adult life and get into relationships, their thinking is the way to never be abandoned again, and I don't want to be because it's so painful. The way to never be abandoned again is to control the person I'm in a relationship with. Control who they see. Control who they spend time with, the activities they do to make sure they will never abandon me. And then another issue that comes out of complex trauma is a child is trying to resolve hurtful experiences, hurtful situations, painful emotions, conflict, problems, and it doesn't matter what they try, they can't resolve them. And so they get to a point where they feel helpless. And that's an awful feeling. And sometimes they even feel hopeless. But being in control gives them a feeling of power. And that's what they've been longing for. So there's a seductiveness to being in control to those who have been helpless for so long. And then for some who become perfectionists, they think the way people will love me and respect me is if I'm perfect. Well, how do I guarantee that I'm perfect? I have to be in control. That's the bottom line. So control becomes necessary to try to achieve this perfectionism. And then we already talked about, I can't fix the internal emptiness, pain, dissatisfaction, discontent. So let's just worry about controlling my external world. Maybe if I control my external world, it'll help me feel better in my internal world. Now there's one other piece that comes out of complex trauma. Severe complex trauma usually leads to narcissistic tendencies or a person becoming a pure narcissist. A narcissist has a deep need to be in control. They need to control you so that you never make them look bad, so that you give them the validation they hunger for, so that they control their image, how others see them, so that they control that you never abandon them or leave them. And so narcissists have high control issues. So that, I hope you see, is that complex trauma leads to control issues big time from many possible aspects. So I want to give you a test, just to see if you might have control issues. And I'm going to go through 48 characteristics of a control freak. Now, if you only have one or two of these, then you're probably not a control freak. But if you have a high number of these, there's a good chance that you're a control freak. So, the first, and I'm going to go through these rather quickly, you micromanage others to make them fit your often unrealistic expectation. So you have an expectation of how everybody should be, and then you got to control them to make sure they fulfill your expectations. You don't believe in imperfection, and you don't think anyone else should either. You try to change those closest to you, number two. You believe that if someone would change one or two things about themselves, you'd be happier. So you try to, quote unquote, help them change this behavior by pointing it out, usually over and over. Number 3, you judge others' behavior as right or wrong and passively aggressively withhold attention or give them the silent treatment until they fall in line with your expectations. So if people aren't doing what you want, you become passive aggressive, silent treatment as a way to control them. And so sitting in silent judgment is a master form of control. Number 4, you offer, quote unquote, constructive criticism as a veiled attempt to advance your own agenda. 5, you offer unsolicited advice about how others can improve their work or their life. 6, you dominate projects because you think that if you want it done right, you need to do it yourself. 7, you take the lead or you just plain take over meetings or conversations because you want it done right. 8, you redo the work of others. So they've done their job, you come along later and redo it so it fits your way, or in your mind it's done right. You are not a good team player. 10, you get stuck in all or nothing thinking. You only see one right way to do something. 11, you struggle to let go, or you ruminate or obsess about tiny details. So you have to have every little detail figured out, know about it, and you obsess on that kind of stuff. You are highly organized and you like systems. 13, you berate yourself or others for minute errors. You have trouble respecting others' boundaries. So if they say no or they want it this way, you have trouble respecting that because you want it your way all the time. You have a fear of disorganization, of failure, of looking bad. That's that fear thing again. You would rather do it yourself than to delegate it to someone else. You have a hard time relaxing because you're afraid if you drop your guard, everything will fall apart. You have a hard time with ambiguity. You want to know every possible detail about future events. So as soon as you're told we're going to do this in the future, then you start to panic. I need to know every possible thing that could happen, every detail, so that I don't fail, so that it's successful, so I look good. You have a hard time being okay with not knowing something. 19, you don't take no for an answer. You can be pushy. You can be demanding and critical. So when you want it done the way you want it done, you demand those closest to you that they do what you want, that they get on board, and be very critical if they don't. 21, you struggle to maintain relationships with a partner, with coworkers, or with friends because of your need to control people and events. In other words, people with control issues don't do well in intimate relationships. 22, if there is conflict, you twist things to make it the other person's fault. You have a hard time owning your own mistakes. 23, you work hard to manage your image, how others see you, what they think of you. So if you think they're looking down on you, you go to work to make sure they think well of you. You present worst-case scenarios in an attempt to influence someone away from certain behaviors and toward others. This is called fear-mongering. So let's say your child wants to get a tattoo and you don't like it. Instead of discussing it with your child, you go, oh, that's a slippery slope. As soon as you take a tattoo, what are you going to do next? Or that's the thin edge of the wedge. If you let that in, you're going to let in, and it's going to be an awful life for you. So you use fear to try to control people under you. Then you also use intimidation as a powerful tool to control others. You create fear in them. Or 26, you use guilt, shame, anger, gifts, flattery, giving them a cold shoulder, withdrawing emotionally, distorted logic, all your tools for controlling people. All tools of manipulation. 27, you want to win all arguments. You must have the last say in a discussion. 28, you have no empathy for those who make mistakes. They are considered to be stupid or lazy or lacking self-discipline. You dislike depending on others, accepting help from them, or allowing them to do things for you. You devote a lot of attention and energy to keeping your personal environment organized, that external world. You have lots of rules, routines, rituals, ceremonies. You like routine, rituals, everything being just so. You tend to overplan simple activities. You, quote unquote, help other people drive. You tell them what route to take, when to turn, where to park. You remind them when the traffic light is changed. You become angry, irritable, or anxious when someone or something makes you late, when things don't start on time, or things don't go according to plan. You don't like when somebody else has the TV remote, or you fight over the TV remote. You get uncomfortable when somebody else has it. How are you doing? Okay, 36. A few more to go. You want things to be predictable and stick to a routine. You're a smother mother or a helicopter mother. You hover over your kids to make sure they don't make a mistake or get hurt. When you first meet others, you look for their weaknesses so that you can leverage that and know how to manipulate them. Next one, when you first meet others, you're a chameleon. You wear whatever mask will get them to like you and respect you, because that will give you power, increased power to control them. So another way to say that is when you first meet people, you work to groom them. So we all have a natural reservation when we meet people about trusting them too quickly. We want to get to know them first before we trust them. A control freak doesn't like that. So they want to speed up the process of getting you to trust them very quickly. Because as soon as you trust them, then they can control you. Next one. In times of chaos or major problems, you like to play the hero that comes in and rescues everybody. Because then people put you up on a pedestal. They look up to you, and that increases your power over them. You have a philosophy that rules are fun. You can be moody, especially if you don't feel in total control. Then you are very irritable. Next one, you keep score. You remember past wrongs so that you can use it against others as a way to manipulate them. You don't forgive and let go of wrongs. You hang on to them so you have leverage over that person. Now there's 4 others that are in the extreme type of control characteristics. So the first one is this. You don't want your partner to see people. You only want her to have you as her only person. You don't want anybody else to carry weight in her life who might influence her. So you want to restrict or control who she can see, how often she can see them. Or a person with extreme control issues is often extremely jealous. If their partner talks to anybody else, spends time with anybody else, jealousy becomes a massive issue. Some with extreme control issues gaslight their partner. So their way of gaining ultimate control over their partner is to get their partner to doubt their own thinking, to doubt their own perception of reality, so that now they just trust you to think for them, to tell them what reality is. And when you can gaslight a person, what you do is erode all self-confidence and trust in their own ability to think and see. And they give you all the power in their life. And the final characteristic is that you are abusive. Your way of controlling is through violence. So 48 different characteristics. How do you do? How did you do? For some of you, you might be sitting there going, wow, I didn't see myself as having control issues, but I think I might. But what I want you to understand is that for many people with control issues, they don't see it as a negative. They see it as a positive. So for example, they might, if you said you're a control freak, they might go, well, I just like to see things done right. That's how they rationalize to themselves that being a control freak is a good thing. It gets things done right. Or they might say, I'm just a very responsible person. As if that's a positive quality, then, to be a control freak. It's part of responsibility. Or somebody has to take charge in situations, so I just step up and be a leader. Or I'm just a type A personality. I have lots of energy and I go, go, go. So for most control freaks, they will not see it as a harmful thing, a bad thing, a destructive thing. They only want to put it or frame it as a positive quality. And so we have to ask honestly, is being a control freak a good thing, or is it a bad thing? I hope you can see, if you back away and look at it objectively, that being a control freak is a negative. It has negative consequences. So the first reality control freaks have to face is they can't control everything. They can try, but they still can't control everything. They aren't God. They can't control the weather, other drivers, other people. But more than that, being a control freak ends up creating the opposite of what you're trying to accomplish. So with your children, you're trying to make sure they choose the right path. You control them so they don't step off that path. But what happens? A child who is over-controlled begins to rebel. And they purposely go off that path so that they can step outside of your control. The exact opposite of what you were wanting. Controlling as a parent breeds rebellion. But more than that, you're trying to solve your own stress and anxiety by being in control, but actually you're feeding your anxiety. You're making it worse. And then you are trying to hide your shame so nobody sees that and have this perfect image. But in certain situations, the masks start to slip and people see the real you and your shame increases. And while you're in control, focusing on your image, there's a part of your brain, that inner critic, that is saying you're an imposter. If people knew the real you, they would not respect you, and that feeds shame. So control does not solve the shame dilemma. And then you destroy relationships. You try to take people's will away from them. You manipulate, use people. You don't love people. And it causes relationships to suffer, and it does a lot of damage to the relationship and to the people in the relationship. So control freaks, they can try to spin it as a positive, but man, it does a ton of damage. Well, that raises a question. Is there such a thing as healthy control? To answer that, I want to put it with a different term. I think a better way to say it is there such a thing as the healthy use of authority? So a control freak is wanting power over others, but it's an abuse of power. And so the question is there a healthy use of authority and power? So if you look at a healthy leader, their desire is to use their power to help the people that they're over, to make the organization healthy and safe for the people who are in it. And that means maintaining certain values, priorities. It means ethics about how we treat each other. So the authority is used to benefit others. It's not about getting what I want. It's not about manipulating others. It's about setting healthy boundaries and enforcing them. And then a healthy leader, they manage the gifts and personalities of others and let them develop and use their gifts. They manage, but they don't micromanage. What happens with a control freak is you'll promote somebody to the position of a leader. So you give them authority, but they're really just your puppet. You give them a position of authority, but you don't give them the power to do the job because you're still micromanaging everything. So you set people up as having authority, but they really don't. And people become hurt and disillusioned by that. And so another way to say that is a leader who is a control freak is an autocratic leader. They want their will done all the time, everywhere, micromanage. A healthy leader provides a democratic type environment. They want the input of others. They want suggestions and advice and ideas from others so that it's a team effort and they're just the one leading in that team, but it's all about what benefits everybody. So let's go to very practical. How do we respond to a control freak? And so the bottom line is you got to enforce boundaries, and they don't respect boundaries. You can say no to them and they just will push past that if they can. And so for many people that you're close with who are control freaks and they won't respect your boundaries, you have to stay away from them. Keep your distance. And in some cases, cut them out of your life because they just cause trouble upon trouble for you. But let me say this. If you have a control freak in your life, so it could be your parent, one of your parents, a spouse, a boss, whatever, and you have complex trauma, they will trigger you. As soon as you sense them in that control mode, you get triggered. And it could be a couple things. It could trigger defiance. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. Or it could trigger fear. I better do what they want, or else they're going to be mad at me. I don't want conflict here. I need to people please. So lots of different things can get triggered when you're with a control freak. So develop a curiosity in two areas. Number one, a curiosity about, why am I triggered? What's going on inside of me? But also a curiosity about, what's tactic? What manipulation tool is he trying to use on me right now? And just observe the dynamics that he's trying to create to control you. So develop that curiosity. But then think through your response. Don't respond in anger. That will only make things worse. So you have to get out of your limbic brain that was triggered, get back into your cortex and say, what's going on here? And how should I respond? So if it's somebody that you might be able to talk about it, who's kind of willing to look at themselves a little bit, you might be able to have a discussion. You might be able to ask them, okay, I know you want me to do this, but I was thinking maybe this way might work. What do you think of that? And that might work with some, but there's going to be some that you know well enough that there's no point in arguing. No point in trying to have a dialogue. So you just either walk away from them, or you try to just change this topic so that you can get on to something else and not end up in a conflict. But you need to give some thought to how you respond to control freaks, and it really depends on who the control freak is. But then you got to go further. This control freak just told me to do something. That triggered my defiance. And so now I don't want to do what they say, not because it's foolish advice, but just because it's a control freak giving that advice. And so you have to get, again, out of your limbic brain and not react just to the control freak, but to be able to say to yourself, is this a wise course of action? If it's a wise course of action, I need to do it, regardless of who gave me the directive. That's such an important skill to learn. Now, I need to say that if you have a boss who's a control freak, a lot of what you do is just going to be, let them do it, have their way, go along with it, do what you're told. But you may find that with a certain boss, you have to draw a line in the sand and basically say, I won't do something illegal. Or I won't do something that keeps me away from my children night after night. Or my spouse night after night. And that might result in you getting fired. But if that's what happens, you have to be able to say, there's more important things than doing what this person wants in this job. Final question, practical. What happens if you went through those things, you go, I'm a control freak. What do I need to do? So let me just give you a couple practical things. If you see yourself starting to slide into wanting to get into control somebody, catch yourself and use mindfulness or curiosity and say, okay, what's going on here? Why am I wanting to go to control mode? And usually what you're going to find is a fear is underneath that. A fear that, I better get in control, or my needs aren't going to get met. They're going to see the real me. Things aren't going to get done the way I want, and I might be embarrassed. So what is the fear? So when you see yourself heading into the control freak mode, stop and ask what's going on. Now, besides the fear, usually there's a lie. So the lie is, with the needs. The fear is my needs won't get met. The lie is I can't trust others to meet my needs if I express them. My needs will only get met if I'm in control. And you have to stop and say, okay, that was true when I was a child, but I've got a different support system now. That's a lie. I can express my needs to safe, healthy people and get a different result than I got as a child. So I identify the lie and then replace it with the truth. Or if you see yourself wanting to go into control mode because your child is going out with friends and you're afraid they're going to make a bad decision, what's the fear? What's the lie? And part of that is you can go, okay, how likely is that to happen? Because in my brain, it's jumped to worst case scenario and they're already a drug addict. How likely is that? What evidence do I have to support that? And usually none to very little. And so therefore, is it helpful to think this way? And why am I focusing only on the negatives and not positives? So you learn how to process and coach yourself through your thinking, the fears and the lies. The next thing is you have to heal your shame. You have to start becoming authentic with safe people and let them get to know you. And once you realize they don't judge you, they accept you, then you can release some of the control needs of making sure nobody sees me. And then you're going to constantly have fear, anxiety triggered. Learn to manage that. And as you give up control, what's going to happen is going to increase your anxiety, increase your fear. So growing and letting go of control means I got to develop tools to manage the anxiety that is the result. Then I come to situations and everything in me wants to go into control mode, but I have to. So what I would say is surrender. I am not going to try to force my will here. I am going to trust the people in my life. I will accept the circumstances I can't control, and I'm going to let it go. And so there's a trust, acceptance, surrender piece. And then part of healing from control issues is, okay, I have to start listening to input from others. Then I have to now use new tools and order my internal world. As a child, I couldn't, but now I can. So somebody said this, being a control freak is attempting to manage your outer world to soothe your inner world. That's called primary control. Secondary control, and I should say secondary control is the focus, the good thing, it's what we should be doing, is more focused on managing your internal response to your world. So you're managing your own thoughts and feelings about the uncertainty around you. You're controlling the only thing that you can control, which is yourself, in response to what's happening out here that you can't control. And so somebody else has said, this secondary control, this good type of control, is learning to control your inner control freak. And then the next thing is developing clear boundaries so that when you're with a person who has a need or you're just out together and they tell you about a problem, you go, what's my part? What's their part? I got to stay in my lane. I can't go into their lane because then I'm going to try to control stuff that's really their responsibility. Now, practical stuff. If you are a leader, be open to other suggestions about how to do stuff. Don't just be an autocrat where it's your way or the highway. Also, begin delegating. Don't have you being the one doing everything. Delegate, and then don't check up on the person. And then give control away in one area of your life. It could be your child's bedroom. It could be the dishes being loaded in the dishwasher properly. Just give up control of that area. That'll freak you out, but it's a good place to start. And the final thing is be patient. You don't change control issues overnight. It takes a lot of time. But if you apply the tools that I've been teaching, you gradually will see this control issue thing become less and less, and you will enjoy relationships more. So that's the end of part 1. Hope it was helpful for you. We're going to take a short break. Then I'm going to come back and do the Christian part. If the Christian part doesn't interest you, not a problem. You're free to go. We'll see you next week. For everybody else, I'll be back in a minute. Well, welcome back. I want to, in the Christian part, take a verse from the Bible, from the very beginning of the Bible, connect it to the control thing and to the life of Peter. And I hope it just really is helpful for you. This verse I've been finding, I've been thinking about, meditating on a lot in the last year. It just really had a profound impact on my own thinking and kind of the Bible in terms of complex trauma. So the verse is Genesis 2:17. So God's created the earth. Adam and Eve have been placed in the Garden of Eden. And God says the Lord God placed the man in the Garden of Eden to tend and watch over it. But the Lord God warned him, "You may freely eat the fruit of every tree in the garden, except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If you eat its fruit, you are sure to die." So you can eat everything except one tree, from one tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So what I think is important to understand is the term, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, was actually a metaphor, a figure of speech in the Hebrew world. And it goes like this. God made humans in the image of God, but less than God. So we do not have the same knowledge of God or the same power as God. He made us that we need to trust Him, depend on Him, because we don't have all the answers. We can't handle every situation. So He created us to be dependent beings. But we don't like that. And so the idea of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is, I don't want the knowledge of the average human being. I want extra knowledge. I want extra power. And that had two applications. I want extra knowledge and power so that I don't need God. I can run things myself. And I want extra knowledge and power so that I can be over other humans, so that I can have more power than them. And so what God was trying to do is to say, having a position of authority is necessary, but the abuse of power is so damaging. Because what happens when people have a position of authority is they think, now I'm above other humans. Now I don't need God. So if something in us hungers to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, so that I don't need God, so that I have power and control over other people. So the very characteristics of a control freak are, I want power, knowledge, so I can control other people, so that I don't need God. So a control freak is desperate to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But why did God restrict this tree? Because God knew that as soon as humans have extra power knowledge, they will do tremendous, horrific damage. So to eat of the knowledge of good and evil, to not be just a dependent human, to be in a position where you feel more powerful and smarter than everybody else, and you abuse that, what God was saying in the very first command of the Bible is that will unleash a Pandora's box of evil on the world. Just think of it. What is complex trauma? It is an authority figure who wants to eat of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil and have extra knowledge and power and abuse that power, and the damage that it does to the children and the spouse is horrific. And that's what we work in. So the very first command of the Bible, God is saying, don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil because it'll destroy families. And it has. But look at slavery. What is it? It was white people saying, we want to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and be smarter and more powerful than black people. You look at broken relationships where there's abuse. It's one partner saying, I want to have more power and knowledge than I am going to allow you. And it always ends up in violence and abuse. So whenever there is power that is abused, that is out of the way God designed it, it unleashes so much damage. And God was trying to prevent that in the very first command in the Bible. What God is saying is, the abuse of power, folks, if you open that can of worms, if you eat of that tree, you will unleash on this world problems beyond what you'll ever understand. And we see that. And it is so sad. And God was trying to prevent it. Now, if you take that command, eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, God says it in different ways as you go through the Bible. He then says, love your neighbor as yourself. In other words, treat them as an equal, not as you having more power and knowledge. Or do unto others as you would have them do to you. Treat others the way you want to be treated. He is saying life only works when relationships are of two equals. As soon as one tries to be superior to the other, it will damage relationships. And that is what God is saying. So let's go to Peter. As you look at the life of Peter, Peter wanted to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil because the two things that Jesus rebukes Peter for on a regular basis is that Peter kept trying to be the greatest leader of the 12. He wanted to have more power than the other disciples and greater knowledge about things. And then the other thing Peter was rebuked for repeatedly is he didn't want to trust. And so Jesus said on a number of occasions, why do you not trust me, O you of little faith? So here's the key. In Peter's mind, what was going to make him effective for God, for serving God, for carrying out God's kingdom, was to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, to have greater power and knowledge than others. But Jesus is saying, Peter, that will make you ineffective in ministry because you'll destroy people. If you want to be effective for me, don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You must develop a deep dependence and trust in me. You must see others as an equal. You must develop a humility. That was a hard lesson for Peter to learn. But he did. And by the time we get to later in Peter's life when he's writing letters to Christians. In 2 Peter 2:1, he starts off by saying, this letter is from Simon Peter, a slave and an apostle of Jesus Christ. He is saying, I am living in dependence on my master. I am taking my orders from my master. I don't see myself as better than others. I see myself as a servant to others. Peter learned the blessing of humility. He learned that the tree of the knowledge of evil, though so enticing, would actually bring destruction and ruin. And he let go of that. And so that's the lesson we have to learn. The humility, not the pursuit of things that would let us be control freaks and abuse our power, because that just destroys. Let's pray. Father, I'm just grateful for this verse in the Bible. And when we understand it, how sobering it is to see that the root of so much of the problems in the world is that we have eaten of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's the problem. And I just pray you'll help each of us in our own lives to develop the humility we need to be healthy, to have healthy relationships, and to be effective in serving you. Amen. Well, that's the end of our Friday night. Thank you so much for being here. Again, I hope you have a great weekend. I look forward to seeing you next Friday.